It's time for the Blazor Power Hour.
Welcome to the Blazor Power Hour.
Introducing the Blazor Power Hour.
No, seriously, it's time for Blazor Power Hour.
Hey friends, it's time for the Blazor Power Hour.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the Blazor Power Hour.
You're checking out the Blazor Power Hour.
Welcome to the Blazor Power Hour.
It's Blazor Power Hour. Go Ed!
Are you ready? Are you set? Got everything all ready to go? Let's do it. Let's do the Blazor Power Hour.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another Blazor Power Hour. I have friends with me today. So I have brought on Egil Hansen. Egil is a Microsoft MVP who's been working on the bUnit unit testing framework for Blazor. And we're here to celebrate the 1.0 release. And we also have Marin with us from the Telerik support team. So you've seen Marin on the show many times now. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to be here. And nice to meet you, Marin. We've talked a bit online, so it's nice to have a proper e-meeting.
Yes, nice to meet in person.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nice to have a meeting of the minds today. It's always great to have some extra perspective on things. We've got some big news to celebrate, though. You released your 1.0 version of the bUnit testing libraries, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's sort of been weird to me because in my mind it's been out for a while. It's like I think was it 2 years ago or something when I just had the very first prototype and I joined. No, it's more than 2.5 years ago or something when I joined you on my very first Twitch appearance on I think just in the start of the new year, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
29? No, it wasn't 29. It was 2020. Okay, so it's just 1.5 years ago. But basically, I was on your show there, and we talked about what was then called the Blazing Testing Component Library or something. It was a very long name.
Naming things is hard.
Yeah. I went for the Microsoft product name, from 2000s kind of style with, put all the things in the name to make sure that at least I check all the boxes. It wasn't very Google friendly because Blazing component and testing and library individual names are not, they're not very unique. But then, a few months later, it hit me that bUnit was probably a very good thing to call it. But yeah, it's been a long time, and I think in my mind, it's been more or less ready for a while. But I've also had that thing where I wanted to I when you sit and build something like that, and you don't really have a hard deadline, and you come up with all these cool things, these enhancements you want to add to it, you forget that minimal viable product kind of approach to things that you usually follow when you're actually building things for other people's money or just your boss's money, right? So I ended up adding just a lot of not issues, but enhancements I wanted to do, and put that on my issue list for bUnit, and then I just keep pushing off, and I didn't want to go V1 because then I couldn't break things and change things, and then I had to sort of promise people. So, but in reality, I think after I sort of wrote the documentation back last summer, I probably was in the place where I could have called it V1. But I'm very happy now that it's sort of a burden off my shoulder to have that out. Definitely, it's good.
It's funny you mentioned that. We go through these things all the time, and mainly it's our teammates Marin and Bobby that rein me in, because I'm like, I want to add these like 9 ideas, and they're like, yeah, we can't add those things without making sure they're not going to break like everything else first. I'm like, but it sounds like fun.
Yeah. And I think that's also I hinted at in my announcement tweet that I sort of had a bunch of like not do's and don'ts, but lessons learned from this is my first open source project, and I think I haven't really put all those thoughts into text yet. But one of them is definitely that if you do something like that and it's easy to get swept up in, well, now I'm just working for myself, I'm just doing things on my own time, I can really geek out on things, but one of the lessons learned is definitely to still focus on getting that minimal viable product out the door and just call it V1 and remove that if it's stable and it works and the features in there works and work as you want them to, just call it V1 and get it out the door, and then you can always go V1 and V1.2 and so on and so forth when you add new features. So
I like the approach that Microsoft's been taking too with their preview releases. So we've got a stable 5.0.
Yeah.
And then we've got the 6 preview tracks that are hitting every month pretty much. And those have all the things that may or may not break things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also now that I have a V1, I probably move to something similar to that, where I will be adding new features. And I don't think really, if you're following the Semver rules, right? You don't really have to go to a V2 necessarily, unless that's at least where you're allowed to do some breaking changes. But for now, I just have a few things I want to add, a few enhancements I want to make, and that can just be 1.1 and 1.2 and so on and so forth, right?
You can go to 1,000.
1,000. Yeah, but but I'll still do some nightly releases on GitHub, and then maybe have a more faster release cadence going forward. But right now I'm moving things around a bit as well on GitHub. So, but it's just great to get it out the door, and I was really thrilled about the reception, and people were I think it's my most liked tweet. So that's nice to see that it's really been well received. Absolutely.
So has anything major changed since, I guess, maybe a few months ago between then and the 1.0 release? Have there been any like big features you added last minute, or things that you've taken out?
I'll say 3 things. So I took out a few things and I added one thing. One thing I added was the ability to write tests in Razor files using and I have to get this right because they actually call it something different than I use, Inline render fragment template syntax, I think it's called officially. So basically where you use that, I was about to switch to my to my main screen where I put myself down there. I can share.
Share a screen. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So let me show what I mean. So but that was something that sort of I had that aha thing. Share screen, and it's dangerous. I know. Okay, second screen. Okay. So I should be. I am sharing something. Okay. So let's go into writing tests. So I did also update the docs before I released. So basically, what hit me the other day a few months ago, was that you could actually. So this is in a Razor file. You can write code like this, where you, if you so here we are in the code block. Here you have. Here we are in C# mode, right? In a Razor file, we're in C# mode when we have that code block. But what you can do in code blocks is that you can create these inline, and I want to get that name completely right.
Yeah,
it's called Inline Razor Template Syntax. Yeah, Inline Razor Template Syntax, where you basically add an @ sign, and then you can start writing, this stuff like here, for example. And this is a better example even. You can also use that to markup, use that with markup. So that means if you compare this test here with the C# version, which we have down here. No, here we have it down here. Here you actually have to put your markup in quotes, in string quotes, like we normally do. And whoops, that was a zoom too much. I think it's okay. And if you have anything like attributes in there, that kind of sucks. You have to escape those, quotation marks on that attribute as well. So if we ignore the fact that the Razor editor in Visual Studio, at least, is kind of doesn't work super well with this syntax. It's sometimes when you add a semicolon, it tries to format things for you, and it completely messes it up. This is super nice, especially if you go into parsing parameters. So if you have a look at parsing parameters like this, so imagine that you have to pass in a parameter this is a very simple component. It just looks like this. Basically, we're not caring about what it renders out, but it has two parameters. In C# mode, you call the render component, and you use this builder style to say, I want to strongly pass in some number that should be integer and or some lines like that. In Razor syntax, you just do this, and it's super nice. It was super. I was surprised the first time I tried it, because this lines refers to this variable up here. So even though it looks like a string, it's actually referring to that. So it works exactly like it would in just regular Razor style. So this is very easy to work with. You can also do it with. You can even have these inline here. I just have them outside just to make it easier. So this is event callbacks you can pass in, and this looks like this in C# code. And if you look at the different examples you have, like parsing child content, well, then you just do something like that, and where you have to, so it's much easier to work with that. And I don't know when that inline Razor template syntax became a thing in Blazor, but I'm sort of kicking myself for not thinking of this before, because the other approach I had before to writing unit tests in Razor files was something called a Fixture Component, and I've sort of and it was quite popular because it was a much more natural way of working with. Again, you didn't have to work with markup in strings in C# like you do. So you had to move, but it was sort of a hacky solution. It worked only with XUnit. I had to create a custom test runner. If anybody knows what that means, it's not particularly easy. And so basically, you had this syntax. But I removed that thing from bUnit. Well, removed it from at least the core libraries. I created a separate library called bUnit web.test components, because a lot of people actually picked up that style and used that in their projects while bUnit was in beta and preview. So I didn't want to break them. I didn't want to leave them out of moving up to the bUnit stable version. So I moved that into its own library, because I don't really see, like, this is much more verbose than the inline version with the inline render, inline Razor. What is it? Inline Razor template syntax. Yeah, this is much more verbose. You have to have this separate, and you have to have all of this where you have this method point down to here and so on and so forth. So this is not as nice. It worked, and it worked for some better than using it in C# files. But so this is what I've moved out, and I don't really plan to add any additional features to it or improve it anymore. I don't plan to add support for NUnit or MS test for this as well, but it's here for compatibility reasons for folks. So that was sort of the big two changes right before Well, those are the two changes that came since, I guess, last summer, more or less.
Very nice. Do you think we could set up a small project and run one of those inline tests to see what that looks like in a workflow?
Absolutely.
I think there's probably some folks that may not have seen unit testing in Blazor either. That might
that's
get,
completely fair. So let's do the command line version here.
Does that include you, Ed?
I'm sorry, including me.
So
I know,
for folks.
Yeah, I know how to do, or I know what it is. I need somebody to remind me to put them in my project.
So for folks who don't know, every time I jump on Ed's stream, I ask him where's the tests, right? So it's become an ongoing joke. I know Ed actually knows what unit test is and is capable of writing them, but I also get that testing is not super sexy. So you don't, if you want to just try things out on stream, you don't want to, deep dive into details, then you probably don't write a lot of unit tests. Anyway, to create a bUnit test project. A bUnit test project is basically just the next unit or end unit or whatever your favorite test framework is kind of project where you add bUnit on top of that. You install an extra package which is bUnit, and then you so same thing happens. There's a guide here, and depending on on your flavor of test framework in your next unit of MS test, you pick the one you want, and you can just follow it down all the way. I am going to cheat a bit because I'm lazy. I have a template for bUnit that will do a lot of the work for us, so we can use that. So this is going to be completely command line. So let's jump into a temp folder, and so we .NET new, and we type bUnit because that's a bUnit project we want to create, and let's give it a name. Coding.
So folks are seeing a command line on the show for a change too. Like that's one thing I always avoid.
Yeah. So, well, I like command lines because they might be easier for people to replicate. Right? They can just look at the code. Anyway, so this .o just means we give it a name. So it'll go ahead and create the project, and we'll have a coding it live project now. And if we go ahead and let's pop that open in Visual Studio Code.
And what's the discovery situation on these templates? I know they exist on NuGet, but I don't think there's like a way to search for them directly.
You mean the project templates?
Yeah, installing the project template. So you'd have to find it in docs, or is there a way to actually like spot these things in a search?
So they are up. I don't know. You mean like how like you would go into Visual Studio and add a package manager and search from them there?
Yeah, I guess so. Unless you're in the docs and you find it there. And this isn't like a bUnit thing. This is more of a general question. Like I've noticed they've been adding some things with templates, but I don't know if they've added like any kind of discovery tool. Like on the command line, can you search for a template, or is it just like you have to know it's there and then install it?
I'm not sure.
I don't think there is.
There's a way.
Yeah, I don't think there is a way. But they keep expanding this template ecosystem, so you can enable a flag on Visual Studio to where if you have it already installed, it will show up as a file new project template. So that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there is a way to update us here as well and do things. Maybe .NET new help will answer that question. But I don't think, I think this is very much like
there's a search.
I don't know. There is a
search, but
I don't know how it works.
Searches for the template, blah blah. Okay, so
sorry, I didn't mean to get too off track. I was just curious if anybody knew.
Did I spell search
Quotes?
wrong? Or
maybe
yeah,
quotes.
probably. Yeah. Invalid input switch. bUnit. Well, I'm trying to do .NET new.
What does just search do?
Dash dash.
It says it searches for templates configured for. Huh.
Oh, okay. So if I do something like that, yeah, it'll.
Oh, look at that! Okay,
Okay,
so didn't find the right one, but
maybe it's because I already had it installed. I don't know. That sucks. Well, okay.
searches on. I don't know what it searches on, but
Sure. Okay. So
okay.
that is something. I don't know if somebody in the chat room doesn't have bUnit template installed, you can try this line here. I don't know if that will work.
I'm just trying it right now, by the way. And it says getting ready.
Okay, getting ready. Yeah. Okay.
All right, so you can find it in the docs, and then once you have it installed, it gives you a nice project to start from.
Okay, let me just see Red Hat Commons. Sure, why not? Enable everything, right? Okay, so this is the C# version of the test, and here we have, so this is just a test. So when you do, and I probably should have named this something like this is a, we can, let's say, so this is a test project, as you can see. Is the font size okay, by the way? Maybe bump it a bit more.
It looks like Coefficient got the search to work and found it.
Okay, cool.
Very cool.
So it's probably didn't show bUnit because I already had that installed. Anyway, so as you can see, this is just a regular, this is just a regular XUnit project where we have, and I should actually update the bUnit template to just do this. So just include the bUnit call, like the base reference, and then you have XUnit and you have some test runners, and the Microsoft Test SDK. So that's basically that's it's just a standard test project. Normally, let me actually do something else. Let me go out a step. The im/r coding it live. Let's just. I need to close.
It's running.
Yeah. Let's try that again. Okay, so let's do something. .NET new Razor class lib/o coding it live. So this is our project we want to test. And then we go ahead and let me double back here in my history. Here we go. Tests. So now we have a project that we are creating and one we are testing with, and then you can go ahead and we can add a reference from one to the other, so it shows it here. We can also add an as solution file if we're using Visual Studio, but we don't do that in this case, so it's going to be .NET. Let's go into .NET add, and then coding it live tests and we want to add.
If you're a Visual Studio user, Egil's basically just connecting the component project with the test project by reference.
Exactly, yeah. Reference, or you could also do this manually by editing the CS branch file, and we want to something like that. Okay, and now we can open code again. I have a bunch of oh man, I should have created a subfolder. Okay, so I'm gonna cheat and jump into my I'm gonna go out of the command line just for a short bit. 1 second, guys. Gotta create another root folder to keep everything in. And I don't want to use all my command line voodoo for one day, trying to move things from the command line. So
while you get that set up, I'll harass you over Visual Studio. So when you come on my stream and ask me where my unit tests are, I'm going to come on yours and ask you where your Code It Live theme is for Visual Studio.
Code It Live. I didn't know we had one, but
I just released it last week, so I forgive you.
I need to check that out though. Okay, so now I have a coding it live project, and in here we have the two projects. We have the test and we have the thing, and we can code into that. So we just see those two projects. And no, I don't need that welcome thing. So what we have now is we have. Wait, did I make a reference the other way around? No, I did not. That's weird. Didn't we? Or didn't I probably said that it couldn't figure out that? Okay, so let's try that again. So we're gonna add, and it's called coding it live dot csproj, and we want to add a reference to code it live. Cannot be added. Oh, it's incompatible. My bad. It's because this is net 5 and we are actually at net 6. So let's just upgrade to net 6 on both parts. So the bUnit generator, the bUnit template generates a net 5 project, but the Razor class library we created was in net 6. Okay, so let's try that again. You actually need to read the output from the command lines you're running, otherwise it doesn't work. Okay, that at least makes it easy, right? Yeah, just assume. Okay, so I could also just type this in manually. It might have been faster by now, but this is basically what you do. We get a reference from your test project to your source project, and here we have a few. We can actually go ahead and move this counter up here into this project. Sure, move it. So the counter component we all know and love, I guess, or at least know from the hello world, from the Find New Blazor project. Everybody's seen that before. The click it and then increments. And we need to add a using statement for the coding it live namespace that comes from up here. So our Blazor components, test components, can capture that. And using coding it live as well. I guess that's not really needed. Okay, so I guess we need to do a .NET restore. So cd, let me jump into the .NET restore to make it happy. .NET build. Let's see if that works.
A quick tip for folks in chat too: if you're running into conflicts with .NET 5 and 6 and you have both versions installed, you can put a global.json file in your project root, anywhere actually in that root. So as far down as you want in that root to set your .NET 5 or .NET 6 runtime, you put that global.json file in, and if you type .NET new, it'll create the appropriate .NET 5 or 6 projects without you having to do any manual labor. And it, like I said, it follows that project root down to where it finds that global.json file. So you got to be very careful where you stick it. So you might want to create like a folder or something that's .NET 5, and then put that global.json in that folder, and then put your projects beneath.
Yes,
it.
Exactly. I do that in all my projects because I always install the latest previews, and that tends to mess things up a bit. So this is the global JSON for bUnit, and it just tells it to roll forward to the latest major version, but don't allow pre-releases. And that also is a very good idea if you have what's the word I'm looking for here? If you have a CI or CD build step up on GitHub, for example, then you tend to install the net 5 version because that's the latest major one you have there. And if you have net 6 previews installed locally on your machine, well, then you are building with two different SDKs, one on local and one up on GitHub, and that can lead to errors where you have a test failing up in GitHub Actions but not failing locally, and that's that's just a pain to deal with. So definitely always add a global JSON. But in our particular case here, we are just using net 6 for everything, so it should be fine. So let's write a quick test of this Razor counter Razor file. I think that's the most interesting thing to do now. So let's go down here to the test project, and let's create a counter test dot
While you're writing up files, I'm going to jump in for a second again about the global JSON file, because it can be useful for many reasons. One of the things I've seen where it saved a lot of people was where previews started raining in, and release candidates and various like batch releases, and then they weren't installed everywhere. Not every computer for your teammates maybe has the latest .NET Core 3.14, I think is the latest patch, or maybe your build machine doesn't have it yet. And if you allow roll forward to all the minor versions as well, some people may not be able to build the project.
Yeah, but
and
the thing
that can
also
save from that hassle.
Yeah, indeed, and when you work in a team, you need to do that. But I would be careful with preventing roll forward of the minor thing, because if you do that, people will have different versions of the minor installed, and then you will force people to install either the latest minor or install a previous or earlier version of the minor. Anyway,
each of these has its downsides, but it's something that you need to think about, I think.
Yeah,
whether
least
you're
agree
on a team or
in the
not.
team. Yeah, exactly. I agree. Okay, so this is just the basis of a test written in a Razor component. So if you compare to this, we have, because it's C#, we have the using statements, then we have a namespace, and then we have the class, and then we get to the meat of the matter, which is the test we want to write. Because usings, we inherit those from the imports, so that's kind of nice. We don't have to repeat those. Namespace is implicit based on the folder you're in, so you don't have to repeat that. Class is implicit because that's the name of the Razor component, right? So you don't have to repeat that either. So all you need to do to make this work in Razor syntax, writing test using C# and Razor in Razor code, is to inherit from the test context, which is a bUnit thing. And then we can go ahead and let me start by just copy pasting this thing in here. And let's see if it can format this for me. It actually it did okay. It did okay. It did as we expect.
I'm surprised.
So
I mean, it is Visual Studio Code though, not Visual Studio.
Yeah. So it's actually it's sad that this is now the gold standard compared to Visual Studio. Anyway, if we go ahead and let me see, where are we? We are here. So .NET test / let me just can't remember the name. I want to have the /v, and then I want just let's see if we get the names of the test with minimal. No, let's jump up to, it spits out a lot of things, but well, okay, so we have free test parsing. I'm not sure why why it's not printing out the names of the test. It usually does that. Oh well. I guess. Okay. Anywho, we have the free tests. We have this test in here, and we have. Maybe I need to give them some names. Let me try it. No, I'm sorry. I'm going off on a tangent. Doesn't matter. So we have this test in here, and we have the 2 tests over here. So that's 3 in total. But instead of using this render component, is just a method that is on the test context. So instead of using that, we can use. There is another method called render. And that render method takes a render fragment. So if we go ahead and take a look at that method, the definition for that is that it takes a render fragment. So how do we create a render fragment? Well, we use that inline render syntax. And inline render syntax just looks like this. So we can type in inline render inline template. Oh man, I forgot the name again. But that inline thing, right? So we just type that. And that's all we need to do. What I also did recently was I added an overload to the markup matches method, which is the thing built into bUnit that does the semantic comparison of markup. So it doesn't really care about the unimportant things in the markup that doesn't really affect the test output. So what we can do is we can simply add in front of this, and then we are able to do this. We can, even if you say, well, that's probably going to be a class on that, right? So here we have the possibility of doing this, whereas if we had to do that in C#, well, it didn't work. But
so
anyway,
you get some IntelliSense there on HTML now, which is nice.
Yeah, I don't know how much IntelliSense you get, but you at least don't get to, if you had to do that over here, well, if I want to do class something, well, now I've broken my string, so now I have to do something like that. Or something like that. Oh, yeah. And God forbid you have multiple things, so you had to break it out on multiple lines, then you had to go ahead and do something like that, and then it might and might not work. and it's, so
I did see some auto-completion or something come up, though, when you're in the Razor.
Okay.
And you typed in class, so it did look like it was trying to help you.
Yeah.
It looked like it got the context. Some ARIA and other attributes, some HTML attributes were coming up.
Absolutely.
So that's super helpful.
That's cool. Yeah. And So if we go ahead and run this, I'm gonna go and give this a display name attribute, just so we can.
Yeah, display name, by the way, is like super helpful. I don't know if there's like a best practice guide that's out there, but that's something that I use quite frequently.
Yeah. That's a whole different thing. Absolutely. So we should run that test again. We still see it parsing, and now it's running like this. We can go ahead and let's go ahead and I'm gonna copy paste this over as well. So what you're basically doing, you're using, and why I like this also, I like this style better. Oh, and here you see, now I hit the format shortcut, and you can see it sort of tried to help me format it by mess. So it's not perfect. I wonder if it's better in JetBrains Writer, but yeah. So I hope that it's something that might be improved in the Razor editor. But
I so hope, but I doubt it. I mean, this is the problem with indentations that we have been seeing in MVC for like a decade, and people are always complaining, like, I don't want those indentations, I don't want Visual Studio to change my brackets, and it still does.
Well, I want them to change them to the way I want it, right? And usually that works quite well for C# code, most of the time actually, and you can configure that quite detailed, but this is super hard for the Visual Studio folks to create, because you are basically mixing markup and C#.
Yes.
And that's a whole new ballgame. So I understand why this is hard, but I hope they fix it somehow. So let's go ahead and delete this C# version of test. So I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. So I do really like this style better, but there is the downside there that you have to be aware of. Be aware of the limitations of the auto formatter.
Yeah, at first glance, too, like one thing that I think might get people is that is a counter component. It is not a render of type counter.
No, exactly. So that's why I have the name. So if we undo this again a little bit, so why this is called render component and this is just called render is because here you are asking bUnit to render a component of this type.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is the possibility of passing in parameters using the Fluent the builder pattern that is part of bUnit to pass in parameters strongly typed to the recipient, to the counter component in this case. Here, reason why it's called render is because we are rendering whatever you give it here. It doesn't care. It can be markup. If we pass in, I actually haven't tried that because it was sort of nonsensical to me. But I guess we can pass in just h1
static HTML and test
hello
it.
world. Sure. Let's see what happens if we run that test. Go ahead and jump over to. I have too many windows open. Sorry, guys. Here we go.
Now, does Visual Studio Code have a built-in test runner at all?
I don't know. I want to get into using Visual Studio or something else. I guess it maybe do have that. I think it has at least some. It has. I don't know. Maybe.
I honestly don't know.
No, but as you can see here,
it ran the test.
Okay. So obviously this fails because it's trying to find an element with the name of P, and obviously we don't have a P in there. Let's see if. But it actually managed to render it fine. So it just So now we are asserting that hello world is different from current count 0, and so here we have the error message from bUnit saying, well, the actual markup was this, and the expected was this, and you have some things you need to fix.
Felt like we gained a new superpower here because before we could only test very strongly typed a component with parameters that we've built through the Fluent API, but now we can throw arbitrary things in there that we may want to make part of our test.
So the only limitation we have with this syntax is that you can only have one top level element. So if, for example, if we if we remove this again and compare this. So now I'm here in this test, we are selecting the P. So we are going into the output markup here, finding P, and then we want to say we want to assert on the content of that one. We're ignoring the header there and the button. So if we change that now, and we have basically, well, if we run that test, we will see that it fails. Let me just run it without all the diagnostic output.
While that's running, I very much wonder what will happen if you actually get a method that returns a render fragment. Maybe you could use one such render fragment to render complex components, pass parameters to them, add some logic, and return that render fragment. And then you can use another render fragment as the comparison, as the thing that you want to receive. And then you can have multiple lines, you can have multiple parent nodes.
So let me show. I think I understand what you're asking for. Marin? Let me see my. Yes. Is that right? Marin. Okay. So the problem is here. Basically, we want to. It complains that we are expecting to have only this, but we are actually getting an H1, a P tag, and a button. Right. So. Okay. So let's just cheat, and we are writing our test after we wrote our code, so we can just do this. Right. We should be able to. Basically, let's align it up prettily. No, that's not a word. let's pretty print this, but you can see it doesn't really know what to do. And the reason that's sort of the limitation of the inline template syntax, inline render template syntax, is that you can only have one top level component. So the hack, not the hack, but the thing that that they have in Blazor is that they have something called a text, the text element, which is sort of a special thing in Blazor that the compiler doesn't output for you, that you can wrap your things in. So if you have something where you have multiple top line things, multiple top level element you want to pass to it. So this is creating a render fragment with all of this in. The text element won't be included. So if we run this test now, it should pass. And you'll notice even that this markup here, it's not the same as we get over here. There's some white space here, and there's break lines and stuff, and that's part of the markup matches semantic comparison. So that's a different story. And Marin, you were talking about parsing parameters to a component, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to build up a very small example to show you what I mean, where you can have a very complicated fragment in the code. Let's see if I can do it real short.
And now I'm missing it. I'm missing your what's it called? The code snippets. I can type parter and hit tap.
Oh yeah, there. Somebody has one. I'm trying to remember the MVP who created those. I'll find it for you real quick. Somebody else did Visual Studio Code, so I did Visual Studio.
Yeah.
Which they need to fix. I'm going to complain about this every chance I can get. They need to fix the V6 installers for snippets in Visual Studio. It's completely broken. So I don't even. I love the snippets I created, but I don't tell people to install it anymore because the installer is so bad that I always have to tell people how to manually install it anyway. So it's just gotten to be a headache.
Yeah. So I've went and updated the standard component, the component 1, that is part of when you do a new Blazor class library. Blazor class library. So let's create a test for that. Component 1. Yeah, component 1 test.razor. And inherits test context, code, and then we need facts, public void, print messages, and here we can do our var cuts and then render, and we have to pass in our component 1.
So I dropped in chat there a link to a Visual Studio Code plugin for Blazor snippets. Yeah, and that's by Scott Saber or Sauber. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he got on those real early on, and I drew some inspiration from that for the Visual Studio ones that I created.
Yeah,
so they're very similar.
And you were right. There is completion for this as well. So what I did was I went to the component 1 component and added a property for that. Can make it a bit more, and then I have the default message from before. So this is a parameter we have there, and when you're just using that inline render fragment inline render template syntax, then you get that as well.
Properties or
the properties
come in.
Yeah. And then we can do our cut.markup matches with I don't know, foo. I can't remember what it actually was. It was in the real component. So I'm sorry, I'm messing about with my. Oh yeah. So this is the actual markup, a div class of something, and then so this just shows how easy it is to parse in parameters here versus what it would be in. And to be frank, it's not too bad. For the most part, if you want to stay in C# and not have the problems, I'm not gonna say all the problems, but not have the problems with the formatter messing things up for you, you can. For the most part, it's pretty easy to pass in parameters. I like to write it like so. You set parameters, and then you go down to the next line, and you have add, and then you say, well, my parameter I want to pass something into is going to be p.messages. Nope. P message, and then you give it the value you want to pass in. Hello world, like so. So that is. These are, besides the obvious spelling mistakes, these are doing the same thing. These are parsing in the message in using the builder pattern instead. So this actually has the advantage that if you go ahead, well, I guess you can't with component 1. You can't go and rename parameters in your components and have that refactor experience if it's Razor-based things going through all your things. But in theory, if you rename this, because this is just this here is just a lambda picking or expression picking the property of that type, then if you go and rename that type using your refactor tools, well, then this will update you in your test, and then it won't break. So so that's that as well. Marin, did you have a example you wanted me to try out?
Yeah, I just posted in the chat, but the chat kind of destroyed all the formatting. But I hope you can copy it.
What chat window did you post it in?
I posted
the private
in
chat.
It's in
private
the okay.
chat.
I posted in the private chat. To give me a second. It's still garbled, but I think you should get it right easily.
I think maybe we can. Okay, so this is it a test method?
Yeah, it should be. I just it's super quickly mocked up because I don't have all the references and stuff.
Okay, yeah.
The idea was to get some render fragment method that basically gives you a render fragment.
Okay, so we have a do test here, and
The test needs to be decorated with a fact and that kind of stuff, but the magic is in the next method that returns a render fragment. That's what I'm thinking about. So you can see how we basically declare a render fragment, and you can use the standard way you write HTML, you can add components with parameters, multiple lines and all that, and you just return that render fragment. And in the doTest component, you call up that method. You can pass parameters data to it, test data like a collection of test objects or whatever you have there, and then you get the render fragment out. So maybe you can pass that render fragment to the render method of the bUnit framework. I'm thinking whether that's possible.
It should be. So so this is actually creating a template render fragment, right? So that takes a value.
That's the example I had at hand. You can simplify it without the templating, but
I think we can make that work as well.
And I'm thinking that you can have like tests that have the expected and the rendering in those too. So that may be something one can use.
I think with the inline. And I messed up the mess. So I formatted your code, and then it did this to the code up here. So.
That's something that you could probably avoid with that type of method invocation instead of using inline inline thing.
But I see where you're going with this. But then you lose the terseness of the code, I think. But
Absolutely.
so this would be we need to add a fact to this fact. So folks, now you people watching, now we're just prototyping stuff here now. That's fine. So
that's what live coding's all about.
Tests, yeah. And
that goes down in history as the Marin test.
Yeah, the Marin test.
It's kind of like the Turing test.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pass it.
Var cuts. So no, well, this won't work because this only takes a render fragment. Doesn't take a render fragment template. I think that's the word I'm looking for. A render template that the text doesn't take. So if we can make this return that.
It's possible, but I don't remember the syntax right now. There was a
just
trick
do
to
this. Just builder and then
there is a Chevron on line 28.
There's a what?
Just after the public render fragment on line 28, there is an extra like triangular bracket is what I call it.
Line 28. Oh yeah, you're right.
That's why it won't compile.
So this should work because here we're just capturing that variable in the output, and this will compile. If we go ahead and just do cut markup matches with nothing, we will see the output. And go ahead and run the test. Let's see if we can get Martin's test to fail. Well, we can get it to fail to compile. Cannot implicitly
a few lines up.
Oh yeah. I'm just going to remove the do test, that one, and let me remove these two tests as well because they don't run anyway. Okay. Drum rolls. So yeah, so this is the actual markup we got out, and obviously we didn't expect anything because that's what the assertion said. So yeah, this also works. You can also do it like this.
My point is that the way to declare a template like that is a bit more similar to the way you would write the component with actual code when you're coding the component. So maybe for some people that might be a bit easier. Yes, you lose the terseness in the test itself because you have to write a couple of helper methods to return the render fragment. But for complex scenarios, maybe it could, I don't know, maybe somebody could like it. I don't know.
Well, you could in theory just have it in the test like so. Oops, let's actually make this a proper string. So something like that, and then we have instead of getting that from the method up here.
Yep.
So yeah, if you like to, so the thing is the render method just takes a render fragment as input. So however you construct one of those, it's fine. So this would give us the same result as before, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
Maybe with a slight change in indentation. No, it's the exact same actually.
No, it's exactly the same.
Yeah. So
I personally like things a little bit more verbose, and I'm kind of biased, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't really think of you. Let's see if this actually works. So this doesn't. So you have a point about the formatting thing because now I'm hitting Alt Shift F to format it, and it's not messing up.
Yeah. So that was the key point of it actually.
Yeah. So if we go ahead and do another render here with this style where we had the text and then we add this like so. So now I think it's pretty nicely set up, but if I hit Alt Shift F, yeah. So format, I could almost live with this, but no. Yeah. So yeah, I really hope that the editor experience will be better with the inline template syntax version. Definitely. Another thing that is a limiting factor right now that is not supported is in that syntax where you have to write it in C# code is, let me see if I can find the one. And I think it might be a bug actually in the compiler. So if you want to pass a component-based template in, you can do something like this in C# code. Basically what we want to do is we have a component, like an item razor file that takes a value, and we have another component, an outer component that looks like this, a template params, that takes some sort of render fragment as a template, and it's a template component itself, and is able to use that template. So what we can do in C# based code is that we can say render component, render our template params of type string, and then we pass in the items, the foobar bas items we want to pass to our template, and then we give it the second parameter, the item, the template we want to render out. You can see it quickly becomes a bit hairy to define, but you can definitely do that. Actually, this gives me an idea, because how you would solve this would be to, well, you would probably go ahead. Let's just steal this sample code here, right? Let's see if you actually have solved that problem I had, because I couldn't get that to work inline.
Yeah, so we have to code it live.
Say again?
We have to code it live.
We have to code it live. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not very good at puns.
For that.
Say again?
Marin gets bonus points for throwing the show name in there.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, make sure you meet your quota so you can get your pay raise next time, right? We have to code it live, yeah. Okay, and we have to get the item we want to pass in as well. So let's create that item.razor. That just looks like this. So we have two simple components. We have a template that basically takes in something. It's a generic list template, and then it for each is over the items you pass to it and uses the template to print that out. So pretty basic Blazor stuff, I hope people think. If somebody in the chat room haven't seen this type of Blazor components before, we can go into that more detail. So if we want to test that using C# based test, not Razor based test, let's jump over to our, well, you can just keep playing around in this one here, and let's format that, and let's remove that. So this will tell it to render the template with a type of string. Then for the items we pass in a list of strings, and then for the template, so we want to render like this argument here. We want to pass in something for that. For that we use this generic method that's called add, where we pass in the other render component, on the other Blazor component called item, which is just a template, and it's a template of type string. So then we have the value, and I think this, no, never mind. Yeah, so there's all sorts of things happening here, but basically the reason why it looks like this is because this is the items, this is the parameters for the items component, which we also need to pass the thing to. So it's super hard to read, I think, right? But this will be able to render that. And this is just because we don't need that, because we're already in that context. So this will be able to render out some markup. So basically we should see something like cut.markup matches, and what do we expect to get? We expect to get, let's have a look in the template. Yeah, we expect to get something like this. So, well, we can just make a more simple assertion. In this case, find all. We want to find span. We want to see 3 spans. So, I guess assert equal, and we expect 3 of those. So dot count. So this test should work no problem. Well, it requires some compilation first. __ builder doesn't exist. Oh,
maybe that's one of the previous tests we tried.
Oh, yeah. It's because this is actually supposed to be __ builder. I didn't know that. There you go.
Yeah, it's hard-coded.
Okay.
Or whatever the term is for generation. I don't know if it's hard-coded anymore.
Okay, let's just remove this assertion here. So, yeah, this test passes. It finds the thing, but what I would have thought I should be able to do, trouble loading, is I should be able to basically, instead of that, I should be able to do render, and what I want to render is my need to have the right parentheses there. Render my params. I want to pass in some items, so the items will be this new string. I guess that would have to be something like this in Razor, or something like that. And let's delete all of this. But we also need to pass in something more, right? We need to pass in that template we want to thing, the template parameter. Whoops. Like so. Okay.
The backslash needs to be at the front.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm supposed to be not super terrible at this, but basic markup rules.
It's live, it doesn't count.
It's live, yeah. What are you complaining
about? Just like
about
dogs
now?
barking, it's live.
Yeah. Oh, I need something like that. Okay, let's see. Okay, so now now we are passing in. We are passing in the items, right? But we also need to pass in, because we have a render fragment of template. So we go ahead in here and say template. No, just template, please. And this is our template. This should have access to the context variable, right? So for each of these, well, we can do something. We can manually create our template and say context. And this should print out 3 spans, right? So I think this is by far much more readable than this, right? I think everybody can agree on that. This will work, but this is not easy to work with. The problem is, as you can see here, the name context does not exist in the current context.
Try lowercasing the C.
If we go ahead and move this out here, this works.
With the lowercase C, it should work.
Yeah. Last time I tried, it didn't. But maybe maybe it does now. Then I need to update my documentation. I'll be damned. Why didn't it work before? Okay. Well, never mind then. I need to update my documentation because I couldn't get this to work when I was writing the documentation, so I just assumed it was a bug. But this is nice. This is clearly much better than this. So I think the builder pattern in bUnit for the C# only version, it works, but it's kind of hard to read in cases like this. But this is much, and you can, if we actually want to make this test comparable, it would be something like this, where we pass in the value that would be context, something like that. These two tests do the same thing. That's super weird. Is it because we are net 6 and I'm net 5 in my... Okay, I'll have to investigate that after we do it on streaming. But that's good news. At least it works in net 6. So, Ed, I believe you asked if you can show that off. Did we manage to answer that question? And or did we just go completely off the rails and do something?
No, I think that was a good comparison there of the two different ways to write these. I would love to see a test runner for Visual Studio Visual Studio Code like we have in Visual Studio, because I think the work cycle, the developer experience is really nice with Visual Studio and its test runner. So what people are kind of missing out on in having to use the command line like this is you actually get a faster coding experience if you're writing tests for your components, and you're able to just write the logic and watch the tests light up very quickly, rather than going out to the browser and having to watch the browser reload, or even hot reloads. Not ideal for this type of thing, because hot reload's not gonna, you're still gonna have to open Chrome DevTools and inspect attributes and all of those things, where this actually gives you not only a quick feedback in what do you call it? That feedback loop.
Yeah.
But it also gives you security in knowing that you have unit tests wrapped around your components, and if something gets changed and there's some kind of regression, you're going to catch it without, getting back into that browser and digging into it.
And the neat thing is, so I opened up the project in Visual Studio and just wanted to show folks that here we have the standard test runner in Visual Studio, and you can see the tests here. And even though these tests are in Razor files, you can still navigate to them just by double-clicking on the file. So it works absolutely like you would. Yeah. And I agree. I think the live, the hot reload, and all those new features that are coming with Blazor Net 6 are awesome, and they will add to people's workflow, especially when you are building a UI where you are prototyping, right? When you want to figure out how is this going to look, and you're like usually I'll do is I'll sit in the developer tools and I'll fiddle around with my CSS and move things around and get that pixels to line up like I want, and then I'll go ahead and then create my test for my component and make sure that it also spits out the thing I want. So live hot reload definitely takes out one of the use cases for bUnit, which was to have a very fast feedback loop, but it also helps quite a bit with I just want to play with things and see how it should look, and end up looking and generate the markup on the fly. So
yeah.
But
the hot reload's great for prototyping and doing some styling and things like that. But unit testing is a lot more solid and gives you more longevity and reassurance that your code's going to work the way it's supposed to.
Absolutely, and in general in testing, I don't want to be dogmatic about it, even though I tease you about that whenever I get a chance. But also for example for the Json thing, the prototype experiment I'm working on, where just the samples I'm creating here for the source generators and trying to use that. I don't have any. There's no tests in here really. It's just in the samples. I'm just trying to create some source generators that work, and I have no test for all of this code here yet. It's just source generators. I like the approach Martin Fowler talks about in his refactoring book, where if he doesn't when you're building new code and you don't really know where you're going with it, you have an idea of where you want to go, but you don't understand. Maybe you don't know Blazor very well. You don't know whatever framework you're working in. You have to experiment first. So writing tests while you're doing that doesn't make sense. But once you have something, you have an idea of where you're going, you have some experiments that work, then you go ahead and you throw those experiments away, and then you start creating tests and then re-implementing whatever you did before.
Absolutely.
So that's a good approach, and people, and it's hard because you just written some code that sort of kind of works, but when you go into that test-driven development mentality where you write your test first, then you are much more likely to, if you follow some good practices around that, to get into a state where you create some code that is actually production worthy, that is stable and can handle all sorts of edge cases as well, because that's usually not something you think about or focus on when you are doing just prototyping. But anyway, to your point about using display attribute from before. I just want to show you. I have some tests for Json for the basic functionality in Json, and I've sort of a pet peeve of mine around naming things. And because I'm using tabs, because I want to be a good, citizen in the community about, naming, about indentation and making it easy for people to use the code that don't necessarily see very well. We use tabs, obviously. But here I'm using the display attribute and writing my test description like so, and just having some throwaway name for the test method itself. So what happens when you run the test? Well, this is the thing you see in both in .NET Test on the console, but also out in Visual Studio. And I've for the Json prototype, I'm using a given then when to sort of explain what is this test for, and this should make it very easy for myself or others that come and look at the code to sort of understand what is this test actually supposed to verify. So it's like double bookkeeping, right? You write out quite explicitly what is this test doing, and then you might have a very quite expressive test itself with at least a very expressive assertion statement going on here as well, that you can sort of like file system should contain single text file with name, so on. So this is very expressive what the assertion statement itself, but also up here you want to have these two to match up, right? So this is a way of keeping you honest. But I definitely like to use the display attribute, because otherwise, you have to figure out where do you use the underscores. How do you make that test name readable? And I would rather have something that is more verbose, that I can understand a half year later when I have to look at the code again, than some should be true and true, like why as well. That the why is important.
I like that cucumber syntax too. That's the way I like to write things out to make sure people understand them well. And then we've got a little side discussion going here with Mr. Magoo and Marin about taking snapshots, like JPEG type snapshots, and how the tests are rendered. And we're not using like a headless browser or anything like that, right? We're using what's the underlying library that renders this out and does the testing part of it, the comparison?
In bUnit. So bUnit is just using the it has its own renderer, Blazor renderer that builds and inherits from the Blazor renderer you also use in your like regular Blazor code, Blazor application. So that's just the standard thing that is part of Blazor, but I've added on top of that to be able to sort of stick some tentacles, hooks into that renderer. Then the raw markup we get out of that rendering is just a string of HTML or whatever you're producing from the renderer. And for that I use to be able to. So you can either look at there's a markup property in bUnit that just gives you the raw markup, whatever that was printed out from component, whitespace, and whatever that is. That's just what you get. But there's also a DOM tree representation of the markup that is provided through AngleSharp. So AngleSharp is
that's the one I was trying to think of.
AngleSharp is a C#. Let me see if I can get this right. So AngleSharp is a C# implementation of the HTML5 specifications. So it's entirely, so you can basically pass it some HTML as a string and say, go ahead and create me a DOM tree based on this. And it'll give you all the what's the word I'm looking for? All the APIs from JavaScript, that it'll give you access to those. So if you go ahead and look here, so we have our cut component on test. We have the markup, which is markup just. Can I get that? So this is just the raw HTML from the rendered fragment or component, and this is just a string. This is just a string. But you can also go nodes, and nodes is the AngleSharp DOM tree version of that markup. So that is what So the nodes here, the DOM tree we get whenever we render something, is what allows us to use the find method, because this is taking a CSS selector. So I don't know, give me all span or classes that have the class names foo, right? So this is just the CSS selector that is exposed through the find method. So you can also go nodes, and then you can use the query selector all. So now we get into the standard JavaScript DOM APIs that are just in C#. So everything starts with an uppercase instead of lowercase, but that's it. So all of that is available. What we don't do, we don't run a browser. So this runs quite a bit faster than using Selenium, or I think it's called, is it Storage Shell? That is the new hotness in that area.
We'll just say Telerik Test Studio.
For example, or Test Studio. Yeah, that also spits up. Test Studio is actually pretty great, I think, because you have that visual editor where you can create your tests, so it makes it much easier for folks that are not coders to figure out, because you have to go and actually find the right button to click, and that might be some sort of weird thing that is depending on the component you're testing. So anyway, you
to
don't
circle
run
back on Mr. Magoo's original question.
Yeah,
the whole creation of a JPEG or PNG would be, I think, pretty far outside of the scope of what you're doing here, because the renderer that you're using is not. It's a renderer in the way that it creates a DOM, but it doesn't actually render graphics. So it's not applying the CSS to the HTML to produce something visual that you can actually take a screen capture of. So even if you were to throw some fun canvas code or something in here to try to capture it and turn it into a screenshot, I don't think it would have any legs to really work with.
No, and honestly, AngleSharp might have a feature for that, because it also understands CSS. I don't know if it can actually capture a snapshot of it, but no, if you want to do something like that, if you want to do more of a snapshot testing approach, I actually, because I pulled out that very lightweight snapshot feature that was an experimental feature in bUnit previously, I do recommend taking a look at what's it called, Simon Krupp Verify. He does have it's interesting, it goes to the commit list for the first one you find on his repository there. He does have an extension for Blazor, and it's there's a version that works with bUnit as well, but it has all of that snapshot testing features with it, but it still doesn't. This thing is actually also the same. It just works with the markup you have. But I believe he was on what was it, the Blazor Train, latest episode of Blazor Train. He is showing off a variant where he combines this with some sort of basic like Selenium kind of solution, where it runs and renders things in the browser, and then it takes a screenshot of it, and then it saves that, and then his library, he has a bunch of different variants of Verify as a snapshot testing thing, but it can, it works with Raven. It can verify lots of different things. It also has AngleSharp thing in it. So basically, it's able to compare two different screenshots to each other, and then you have that verification. And I believe that is also what you can do with Telerik Test Studio as well, right? It can do screenshots as well.
You can do screenshot comparison. You can dig into PDF files. You can do all sorts of really interesting things with it. Responsive UI testing. So you can test the mobile output and all of that. But one of the things kind of to mention with Mr. Magoo's idea is, I think ideally you really want a browser to render those things, because a headless browser, even if you could get a screenshot out of it, might not be ideal, because each browser may handle that slightly different. And what we do with Test Studios, it's cross-browser compatible, and it will run that same test suite against It has to be configured this way, and it's very simple to do. But it'll run it against Edge, Chrome, and Firefox, and compare the outputs of all of those to make sure that there's not some CSS feature that's not supported or something in one of the browsers that makes that screenshot different. So
I agree.
You don't want to test in a vacuum with that kind of thing.
No, and I think it's a limitation that I'm upfront about with bUnit is that you don't run anything in the browser. You don't run JavaScript. The CSS you have don't affect the test either. So if you have a display none on an element in your CSS, it'll still you only deal with the markup that is produced, and that's what you can manipulate. You can trigger your callback, event handlers, and such things. And everything that runs in C# is basically what you can verify with bUnit. And if you want to do end-to-end testing, use something like Telerik Test Studio to set that up and have those run where if you have JavaScript bits of your components, and it's important to test those as part of your test. Well, and you want to sort of have that end-to-end testing experience, then bUnit is more your unit test framework, whereas something like Test Studio is for the end-to-end integration test scenario where you need to pick that, I think.
Yeah. So in my experience too, I have found some oddities with the way your component is rendered as well, in regards to like, did you just freshly like hit that page, or did you navigate to a page? So the components are rendered kind of in a different life cycle in those two cases. So if I just go in my browser and I navigate directly to a page, and the application has to spin up the entire app, render all the components, versus I'm already in the app and the components are rendered and I navigate to another component route. Those two things have different life cycles that fire off. And I have found bugs just navigating between pages that don't crop up if you hit a page directly. So there's some things that you want to test in regards to that as well. So in some of my Test Studio tests, I have a test where I hit the page with, I blow out all the cache and hit that page raw, hard reload it. And then I also have a test where I navigate to that page from another page to check the behavior, because the life cycles are different on those two different approaches.
There's certainly some, depending on how you configure your Blazor app, there's certainly some things around pre-rendering, where if it's a WASM application, it'll pre-render first on the server, and then it has to do something there, yeah. So, the first render versus not first render, there's some differences in that, absolutely. So,
Oh, now that I mentioned, sorry, I just remembered why I had to do that specifically. It's disposal. The disposal of components when you navigate away from another page, that can throw an error as well. So depending on what you're testing, you may want to be navigating, or you may want to be just flushing cache and hitting things. You might want to make sure that you've completely blown your cache out, and make sure that JavaScript files are loading when they're supposed to, because some of those things are lazy loaded now. And if you're in your code, you change a path or something that's lazy loading a JavaScript module in, sometimes your cache will not pick that up unless you clear the cache. So you'll think everything's fine and dandy, and then when that cache finally recycles, you'll get errors because the file's now missing.
Yeah. There are some things you need to be aware of when you're building Blazor applications. Absolutely. If you want to test disposing of components, then you can definitely do that with bUnit, because that's all C# code. But and JavaScript interrupt is another thing where to be honest, I need to improve the documentation a bit. But at least it should be possible now to set up some. Basically, you have to, when you are building Blazor bUnit tests of components that are calling JavaScript, you need to tell bUnit's built-in JavaScript runtime or interrupt logic, how to actually handle calls that it receives from your component you're testing, and you can do that in a very loose fashion where you just say, well, whenever you get a call, just return the default value for whatever return value that call is expecting, and that might just make your test pass. Or you can go in and set it up explicitly like you would with normal mocking tools like JustMock, where you say when you get this call, return this value, and you can set up the call. You can configure that call to say, well, you get this call with this parameters and this identifier and so on and so forth, you have to return this value, so that you can control, you can verify, and you can also, like with a mocking tool like JustMock, for example, you can like similar with the JS interrupt in bUnit, you can go and verify that the call has happened. So with bUnit test, you have to treat that interaction with JavaScript as if it's similar to like a web service call, for example, from a typical system under test kind of scenario in unit test. So you have to split those up. And by the way, if you prefer to use JustMock or some other mocking tool to actually represent that IJS runtime interface, you can just register that with the service collection in bUnit, and it will use whatever mocking tool you provide instead of using the built-in one. But the built-in one in bUnit is specifically tailored just to work with the JavaScript interrupt, so it has some APIs that are not general purpose but more specific for Blazor and JavaScript interrupt. So yeah.
You have a nice test doubles section there in your documentation that has good examples of the IGS runtime and some fakes and things for authorization. That's all very like helpful info in there.
Yeah, this one was contributed to me by or to contribute to the project by a member who basically, well, if you need to sort of test some components that use authorization view of authorization, then you basically call, if you have your test context, you just call add test authorization, and it'll return something to you. It will return an auth context that you can use to then configure what is my state, what is the authorization state and authentication state of my Blazor runtime at this moment when I'm rendering that thing. So it makes it very easy to, again, this is a very specialized, it's a fake more than a mock if you want to get into terminology about test doubles, and but it's basically a fake of the authorization system that doesn't talk to, I don't know, Facebook or OAuth provider or something. It's just an in-memory thing that we can control through the test. And then we can go in and say, well, we're gonna, for example, set it up to be set that it's currently it's authorizing, or that it's authorized and is authorized to this test user, but the state is actually unauthorized. So you can be authenticated but unauthorized. I guess that's something there. Or you can set it. You can add roles as well. So if you want to say, well, I'm authorized with authenticated and authorized with this role or more than one, then you can do that as well. So that's super cool. Also with policies and claims as well. So if you have components that use that, this is an example of a built-in test fake that is. And thank you, Mr. Magoo, for that message. But yeah, so this is an example of a specific test fake or test mock of something that we can provide in bUnit. You could also do this with JustMock, for example, and set that all up yourself. But in this case, it's just a more convenient way where we have this set claims and set authorized instead of having all the usual setup things you would normally have.
Yeah, I want to point out really quick too that we have at Telerik a example of using bUnit with our components.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't updated it to 1.0 yet, but I'm sure that's something that Marin and I can work on.
I have this page, and I was sort of goading component vendors into, like, if you have a guide for how to use this with your component, like writing test of components that use your component library, then go ahead and kudos to Telerik for actually doing that. You can see you're the only one in the list, so you have a leg up on the competition there. But yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that our components could hook into your test suite and make sure that you can mount our components, because we have a root component, which a lot of Blazor just components in general have something like that. It's basically providing a cascading parameter across the application. So we wanted to make sure that our cascading value was passed properly through the test framework and stuff. So we test it with usually the latest version with this 1.0 just shipped, so we haven't got to it quite yet. But
I have been talking
the tests
to Marin,
that we have should work.
Marin and I have been talking about getting. I think you have a. I don't know if that sample is out yet, Marin, but we have actually been working on a sample that sort of enables some of this to show how to do that.
Yeah, well, so most of the things that you suggested in the private discussion that we've had are already live in that link that I posted in the chat.
Yeah.
There are a few other things that you mentioned that we need to look into, and it's kind of a time constraints thing. We need to get to that. It's about the JS interrupt thing, by the way. There are cool ideas there, but somebody needs to get to looking into it, and
so in general, there is that's also a recent addition that I added to make it easier for folks like you in progress to basically give people either a NuGet package or just a sample, just a class. Let's say if you want to test with our component or test components that use our component. Here's an extension method that you just call before you render anything with the test context. And one of the things that you can do with that is there's a render tree property on the text context now that you can add things to, which when you call the render component or the render thing that takes a fragment, this whatever you add here, in this case we add a cascading value. And then when you call render component, in this case print cascading value, it will be rendered inside this cascading value. So it's a way for us to have a general place to add cascading values or add, for example, the Telerik root component to the render tree, and then we can have a different method, a test method that actually does the test, but doesn't have to include that every time. So you don't have to have that in all your tests. So that's that was added specifically to make it easier to have some general purpose test setup code that can be reused throughout.
Very nice stuff. I'll just echo what Mr. Magoo said a minute ago, and it's incredible the amount of tooling you've provided for the community. Such a good library. So congratulations on 1.0. I highly suggest everybody check it out if you're doing any kind of Blazor development. Add some unit tests to your app. You'll see the improvement in your developer experience right away, I think.
Yeah, and thank you to Telerik and Progress. They've been supporting bUnit for I think over a year now. When they started sponsoring, like the first corporate sponsor I had, I have, still have. So it's super awesome to have that support, and I think it's also good work that you guys are doing when supporting the community in various ways. So yeah, and I'm just so good to have this out the door and really have a V1 there. And
yeah, welcome to the chat, Layla. Layla's trying to figure out how long we're going here. We're getting ready to wrap up here now, so if you just joined, sorry, you're catching the end. But Layla, are you streaming in a few minutes here? Are you starting your show? Should we raid you? Or are you just taking the afternoon off? Yeah. So sorry, I mean to cut in here, Egil. You've got your GitHub open here.
I wanted to just show so there's lots of issues, and thankfully only one bug, and it's not really so much a bug as something that would be nice to have. So most of this is just enhancements, but there are some things. If people want to jump in here, I'll be happy to introduce you to. Well, okay, I need to remove that block list as well. I'll be happy to introduce and maybe do a stream or two where I talk about how bUnit is structured and how you can contribute if there's interest to that. I have had some contributions over the years. Over the year, it sounds like a lot, but I could definitely use some more. And now we are gearing up for a Net 6 release, so I already have a few things in here that probably could and probably might maybe needs explicit support. For example, custom event things in Net 6, or at least make sure that they work. So if people want to help, there's definitely some options there that are both, easy to pick up issues as well as more complex things. Most of it is enhancements that are, in the list of things that need to be done. So 27 of the 37 are just enhancements, good ideas. So definitely that would be lovely if people want to help out. Let me know.
Absolutely. And where can we find your stream?
Oh, I'm on... We're gonna do Twitch Inception because I'm quite sure I'm actually streaming, hosting this channel right now. No, I don't know how that works because I'm logged in. But anyway, I'm on... No, I don't know how that works because I'm logged in. Anyway,
and now we got double audio. Yeah. I always do that.
No, stop. Stop playing, damn it. But yeah, I'm up here. I'm at twitch.tv/Egil Hansen. So,
and what's your schedule like?
My schedule is this. This is my schedule for usual. This is my usual schedule. So this is 1 p.m. That's Universal Central Time UTC, because here in Iceland, where I am right now, we don't use summertime and wintertime, so it's just the same time all year round. So that's 1 p.m. UTC, and that's 2 p.m. GMT if you're in the UK, or I have no idea what it is where you are at. Maybe 8 Pacific time.
I'm on the East Coast, so I don't. That's like 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock.
10.
I think it's like 5-hour difference between UTC and the East Coast.
If you go to this URL, it'll tell you.
It'll tell you
local time zone. So let's stop.
Time zones are hard.
We'll be here all day.
We should write a unit test for that.
Well, yeah. I don't think you can. The time zones are hard. But yeah. So it'll be lovely if people come and hang out once in a while. I usually stream about Blazor stuff, bUnit development. I'm having sort of a series of streams around Json, the Json prototype thing. Maybe we can use that to generate a static website using Blazor and then spit out HTML instead of markup in the browser. That could kind of be cool. I've also done a 12 episode series on writing bUnit tests for the Blazing Pizza Workshop, and it's this playlist here. I can throw that in the chat. And so
that's
if you are
good series to check out there.
Now I need to go to the right chat place. Maybe if I post it here. But yeah. So it's just 12 Twitch streams of me going through all the sessions or chapters in the Blazing Pizza Workshop and using bUnit to do mostly test-driven development of those parts. And so yeah, there's definitely a lot of content on that as well. So yeah.
So I'm going to set up a raid here. And we're going to go over to 425 show. They gave us a raid yesterday, so we're going to go pay it forward and get back on 425 show. But I want to thank Egil, Marin, you guys for joining me for the show. Egil, again, congratulations on bUnit. It's an awesome
Thank you, my
tool.
friend.
Great work, Egil.
And good luck with your stream. And
Thank you.
We will definitely have you on again sometime. So thank you all in chat for joining us today. You guys make the channel possible, so thank you very much. We're going to raid 425. This is some Microsoft folks over at 425 show. And we'll go see what they're up to. We've got streams coming all week long here as well. So we've got some React with TJ this afternoon. We've got VR tomorrow. We've got the chat show with Sam Basu tomorrow morning. Lots of great stuff. So tune in, hit follow on the Code It Live channel, and I should be hosting those on mine if you're signed into my channel right now. But everybody, take care, and we'll see you soon. And Twitch is trolling me, is not setting up my raid. Something went wrong.
Yeah,
please try again.
It's hit and miss with me as well.
Yeah, these raid things. So let's try it via command this time. 425
command line
show. You already have a raid in progress, so you may or may not be hearing me right now because I may have already raided. We'll try this on the other channel. We've got 2 channels going as well. Little syndication setup here. 425 show. So goodbye, folks, if you haven't heard the goodbyes yet. It says that we're raiding. Okay. Raid in progress. So both those raids went off. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, everyone.
See you again soon.